The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves. An irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the SuperHuman Academy Podcast.
All right. Well, it's great to be reconnecting. It's been a while. I apologized for taking forever, but you sent me your book and I read it and I really enjoyed it. And and then just took a while to get back to you. So
Hey, listen, you're running a business here. I totally get it.
Yeah. Well, what's happened in the intervening space? What's going on?
Well, what I've done is I have hired a professional actor to do an audiobook.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I am in the process of selecting a candidate to do a Spanish translation.
Great.
I secured an office in downtown Alpharetta. It's only 2 miles from here, but I have a dog, and I cannot work at home. I don't know how people do it. And so as a matter of discipline, that office I'm going to be taking possession of this week. And so that's going, and I'm looking to hire a program director of marketing to basically do the kind of professional marketing of the book that big publishers do. I mean, that's all they do is have somebody knows what they're doing. And that wasn't an avenue open to me because I've never been a writer before. I've never written a book.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have been CEO when I run companies, and I know what it takes to get things done, and it's hiring the right people. So I'm in the middle of that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that things are moving along because I really enjoy this story. I mean, so for those who are listening to this, you sent me your book 1 Mile at a Time, and I'll read a little blurb here from the back, or maybe I'll just say it from memory. So, Ed, you were the winner of the last, what did you call it, transcontinental road race in the United States. Is that a correct way to say that?
That is correct. It's a race.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. As you read the book, you understand what a dynamic environment that was. 27 cars, nationwide APB. I mean, it was just crazy. Since then, there have been two or three people who have driven the shorter course, which is New York to Portofino and LA, singularly with no documentation, no reporters, no proof other than their cell phone that they did it.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, that's not a race. That's just a demonstration.
It's like a time trial.
Yeah. Because one of the reasons we haven't done this anymore after my race is that the United States police enforcement state troopers are connected from Massachusetts to California.
Yeah.
It's a totally different environment.
Yeah.
And they don't have a sense of humor. I think you read in the book a couple of cops that had a sense of humor about this. It was really pretty cool.
It's pretty funny.
It's not that they're not bad, they're bad people. It's that the environment they're in is very autocratic. They have to do it. One of the examples, I don't know if I told you this last time, I hope you don't ever get pulled over, but one of the first things that most police officers ask you when they pull you over, do you know why I pulled you over?
Mm-hmm.
Now they're trained to do that exact phrase. Do you know why I stopped you? Do you know why I pulled you over? They're interviewing you to see if there's something else going on that they should be taking. So, I mean, but that's their training. Okay. And so that has changed the environment. The second thing, well, we have run this race. The race has really started in 1905. There's never been a serious accident in the history of the race.
Mm-hmm.
It has got, the population of the United States has gotten so big that you can no longer, in my view, try a 3,100 mile race as fast as you can and not run the risk of something bad happening. It's just the logic of number of cars on the road.
Sure.
The second, which is really more important, the liability sector of the legal environment in the United States is that you're going to get your ass sued off like you wouldn't believe. I'm talking about they'll go after everything in your world because it's technically illegal. And that has caused people not to organize. Like Ed Preston organized my race. He lived in Boston. Nobody will do this anymore because of the liability they have.
Yeah.
So it's really been an evolving thing. Although it's interesting. There's still remnants of this whole idea of racing as fast as you can and endurance racing, and that's the Iditarod in Alaska. That's the only race going on in the United States today on a regular basis. It's sponsored, competitive, documented, and it's just part of the It's just a period in time. We have to move on. I understand that, but it was an awful great adventure being there.
Yeah, well, it was fun to read about. Before I read your book, first of all, I didn't even know those types of races took place, and I didn't have context for it. And so when I started reading, it took me probably to like halfway through the book to realize that it was an illegal race.
Sorry.
No, that was okay because it was actually kind of fun to like come to that realization naturally. It wasn't just like, hey, this was illegal. It was like, wait a minute, so what are they doing? And then as I'm reading through, I'm like, oh, like they're getting pulled over, like the cops are chasing them. Like you had a story. I sent this in the email I sent you a bit ago, but like the bit about you at the end of the race, you're speeding through Imperial Valley in California, and it's a hot day, there's probably like heat rising off of the ground, you can see it, and you're getting chased by a police helicopter. I'm like, oh my goodness, like this escalated quickly.
It all happened so fast. No, up to that point, I had been a strict disciplinarian on this race. I demanded that that we, for safety reasons, we got a group of cars. We never approached them faster than 20 miles an hour faster, and then we would accelerate after that.
Yeah.
And I had a rule: we never run the cops because that's a guaranteed you're going to jail for a long time type of thing to do.
Right.
I think Tim and I were just so shot and had gone through so much. We just threw that rule out the book. We said, because Tim was a engineer and a mechanic, and he understood not just cars, but aircraft. He had an ultralight airplane.
Yeah, right.
He understood he recognized the helicopter. He says, Ed, this baby can't keep up with us if we don't overheat.
Right.
He knew it was a Bell 206, I think. At 68 degrees at sea level, it can run up to 140 miles an hour. At 110 degrees in the California desert, what it can't, because I think I explained in the book the physics behind it. But as the air thins out, the helicopter uses its blade to accelerate. There's not enough air to do it. So we took the chance. It was really kind of, what the shit? This is the last time we're going to do this. If we go to jail, we're going to go to jail. And that's why we decided to do it. And the helicopter basically, we don't know. We saw smoke and it turned around.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know if it had a lubrication leak or whatever. But the next time we heard about that was at the hotel in San Diego. And Ed Preston came up to us after the awards banquet and said, he's been notified that the California Highway Patrol are after us because of that event.
Oh,
and they had information of who we were. They got that information and they were going to try to track us down. So we just, we basically went incognito, used somebody else's name to run a hotel room. We got up at 4 a.m. and drove to Vegas. To get out of that situation.
Well, when I was reading that, I was like, edge of my seat, reading about the helicopter chase. I'm like, how on earth has this not been a movie? It's like this is movie material, and the fact that it actually happened, it's not just like a 007, fiction. Yeah. This actually happened, and man, I was like, how have I not heard about this before? Because this is pretty epic. And then what I really wanted to have this conversation about, if it's all right with you, I mean, the race is obviously really interesting. People should pick up your book and read it because it's a great read. But if I look at this book, the front cover, for those who can't see it, it's like a road stretching off to the horizon in the mountains, and it's very clearly oriented around racing. But then when I was reading the book, there's a lot of things that were not about racing, and I honestly found some of those parts like even more intriguing because I'll share this. Like, I was reading the part about where you were, I forget what the company was that you were with, but there was the patent issue.
Yeah.
And
Carborundum in Niagara Falls.
yeah. Yeah, right. And, I kind of thought, okay, he's just providing some context. This is going to be relevant to the race somehow, like whatever. And the way you wrote it was almost nonchalant, but it was like you write it, and I almost do a double take. I'm like, wait a minute. So they're under this, like the company's probably going to fold. I think you were an intern or like an entry level employee, not a lawyer at all. Their legal team had kind of given up, and then you basically saved the company from this law, or like the patent putting them out of business. And like, wait a minute, what? It was so nonchalant. It was so kind of casual the way you put it in there. I was like, that's actually an insane story too. Like, that's a movie by itself as well.
I appreciate that you brought that up, because the point I'm trying to make with this book is to have the attitude I've had over my entire life. I've had periods of times of really bad attitudes and really good ones. And part of it is listening to, actually some of the good attitudes happen after a bad one, when you realize you're bad and you want to change the damn thing. But the point that I'm saying is the attitude I took is that, I've been given this opportunity that nobody thinks I can do. And I just became dedicated to it, because that was part of how I was brought up, is that, you kind of approach the challenges in front of you, not with the expectation of winning, but the expectation of doing the best you can. And I could not let the fact go that as I interviewed employees in Niagara Falls they've been there for 40 years, that there was a previous patent and nobody could prove it. It just seemed like was something wrong. And then I also understood that, and I didn't do it this way because I wanted, gratification, but I also understood this was important, because there are people going to lose their jobs. And I just went, and so it was like an epiphany at night, the night I woke up. It was like, and I didn't want to do this. I mean, I basically was scared. I was getting an MBA at the University of New York at Buffalo. I needed the job. I didn't have the money. I was thinking of looking for another job. My boss had already told me that I'm going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a conscience call. I mean, it was, you got to take a shot at this. And I don't know why. I think if you read the book, there's a little bit of I attribute to almost a spiritual thing,
mm-hmm.
but it's part of the attitude that I find makes us most grateful and happy about our lives. I'm glad we did it. If you can get in that frame of mind that you are destined to do something good about this, you're going to end up looking back on your life and being grateful for that. And so in a sense, the attitude I got up and getting up at 5 a.m. and going in and trying to make it work, I almost feel like I got help. I don't know. I've always said my grandmother always watched out for me. But it was almost like a spiritual experience. When I saw that book, I had every patent book, from that period, and I looked at that frigging diagram. I mean, it was surreal. I mean, it really was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to sit there and stare at it for a while. And the sense, as we're talking about this right now, the fact of the matter is, I was just thinking about doing the right thing. I didn't know how important it was. And when that manager came into my office afterwards, thanking me for saving his job, I mean, I just didn't realize that that's how important it was. And I think sometimes if we open our minds and be honest with ourselves and look at our humanity and what we can do for others, sometimes good things happen. And I never thought about the fact that 200 people are going to lose their jobs. I just thought about it. I just don't want to give up.
Mm-hmm.
So it was and I'm thinking way back, but it was almost chilling. You remember I said in the book, and maybe you can rate this. It was all when he came in and talked to me and then left. I felt almost like what a human being feels when you cross the street and you almost got hit by a car or a bus, but you didn't know it until afterwards.
Right.
You get, wow, if I had given up, I wouldn't have had this conversation with him. So I think that's what I wanted to share in the book, that experience.
Well, I think you shared it well because it's written in that way too. It's like the way that it was written. This is kind of what caused me to do a double take as I was reading. It's like you're not describing it as if, like you fully understand the ramifications of what's happening in the moment. It's just like, well, I thought I'd give it a shot, and so you're like looking at these different like patent documents and whatever, and then you happen to find something, and then it's like, oh. And then I saved everyone's jobs and I saved the company, and it's like, whoa, like this is huge, huge result. And it was just because you were the one person at the company who didn't just throw up your hands and say, well, it's impossible. You're like, yeah, maybe. Give it a shot, see what I can do.
The thing that I'm trying to say, and this is something important because we live our lives myopically within our own brain. I mean, like I'm talking to you now, but I'm doing it for me. The thing that I learned from that, or I consciously became aware of, which is a better way to put it, is that we can make differences in other people's lives that we don't know about on how we handle ourselves. And what that is, what I was trying to, and I was only getting that concept of the young man, and I hadn't fully developed it until later in life. But I'm starting to understand the things that I do impact other people in a way I don't know. And they could be good or they could be bad, and so what I've tried to do, given the human faculties I've had, sometimes I try to just remember, not, hi, how you handle this is you may just impact one of the people involved. Do the right thing. And that's something I've struggled and failed at and done a lot positively through the entire course of my life. And that was my first experience of understanding when, when he was standing there. I mean, I remember, I still have a thing. He's standing there and I'm saying, oh my God, he's telling me I just saved his job, and I didn't look at it that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why the reason why I'm sharing this in the book. It's an attempt to explain to people. Actually, the book is part of what I'm talking about. What I mean is I want to share with people positive things I've learned. You'll get the negatives in there. I mean, for a year, I became totally a self-absorbed idiot. But the thing that I'm saying is that I want to share with them that this is what life's really about. And this is what you can do with it. Understand the impact you're having on others, because we become so in ourselves, we don't think about that.
Well, I think one example is another thing I really wanted to ask about from the book of going outside yourself. And again, I was reading it, and it's like the way it's written is like, oh yeah, this is just normal, because I think that's kind of the frame of reference you were in at the time. But then when I like take a step back and like, what did he just say? That's very unusual. Which was your first marriage? Would you be willing to share that story?
It was this. Yes, and I'm trying to recalibrate, because there's a link between how I approached the patent lawsuit and how I approached my relationship with Carlene. In that there was an inner voice that said this is the right thing to do. Now, to those who haven't read the book yet, I would actually like you to read it, because it was a situation. We became we're an MBA program together. We became friends. She's a petite blonde, very attractive, but we were friends and not, basically involved romantically. But we came to be very fond of each other. And then she finally revealed to me she had cystic fibrosis. Now, I knew she was coughing, and I knew she, had schedules she had to keep. And I knew she was petite, which is sometimes a characteristic of being that. But I think petite girls are great, whatever. I never thought of it. And it was a stage in my life where I was trying to redefine I had lost direction of what I wanted to do. The car burning experience had happened. It was good, great. I got promoted and got a great job. And then about later, the company was under a takeover, and it was basically sold. So the relationship, the people who were running the company no longer knew who I was. So the advantage I have of them knowing what I did is not there anymore. And I was kind of at a loss what to do. I went back to UB and was in the master's PhD program for economics. I ended up just getting out the master's. And basically she was a tremendously, look, I platonically loved this girl. Okay. I'm talking about, it wasn't a romantic love like most people think it is. It was really something. And she explained to me that she may only have 24 or 36 months to live. Because back at that time, a CF patient never lived past 25. She was already 22. And, and she had been accepted to Northwestern University in a PhD program and couldn't go because she lived in New York, and the Blue Cross Blue Shield she had was really in relation to her parents and the work she had. It actually became the job, and it wasn't transferable to Illinois. And I just remember sitting there and saying, I'm still trying to find myself. Whatever. This is a person I really care about. I could see how she's angst with this because this is the dream of her life to get a PhD. And I said, what the hell? I said, Carlene, I've got a job. I had an offer in Chicago from Atlantic Richfield. I got a job there. If we marry, you can get covered on my insurance. She had already researched that Northwestern has a fantastic healthcare program when she would graduate, if she taught there. And I figured, if I walk away from this, to think about what you would feel like in that situation. I would probably have hated myself the rest of my life. But I did it, and I suggested get married. She resisted, and we did. And, a miracle happened. I mean, right in the early 80s, they're making breakthroughs in this stuff, especially in high-end hospitals like Northwestern University or University of Chicago. They were making great breakthroughs. And the way the problem happened, I'm sorry if I'm pausing a little bit because this is more, I'm thinking emotionally as I am remembering. The situation kind of fell apart. She did get pregnant, and never told me about it. And then, went to the hospital and got an abortion and then told me. And, I basically, I didn't react to that the right way or the wrong way immediately. It's something that comes and hits you and you got to think about it. I said, this is not a marriage. I was Catholic. I wanted to have a wife and kids. I married her because but I never considered that was the person I was to spend my life with. Mm-hmm. I was a young guy because still, I could have kids. And, it caused problems with me. And as she got healthy, meaning the treatments got to where she could be independent, I had to have conversations with her. It went on for a few months. I said, look, this is not the marriage for me. This is not what I'm looking for. You've known that. And it was really hard on her. It was something where we agreed to separate. We would not get divorced because in that time I needed to make sure she had her health insurance from my company. So we stayed married for a year and a half. In a sense, I've questioned, did I do the right thing about it? But she lived another 18 years. And all I can tell you, and I have 4 kids I wouldn't have had if I hadn't made the decision. Okay. I was really going with my conscience that I felt I had a calling in life to have a family. And she already had the abortion. She didn't tell me about it. There's a dramatic thing, and this is really hard. When she said she had gotten pregnant, I said, I wonder if it's going to be a boy or a girl. She says, you don't understand. I just had the abortion. And that hits you kind of hard. I don't, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't, the moment that it hits you, that's said, is not as impactful what it is later on the next day when you think about what was said.
Yeah.
And it meant I was never going to have my life that I had dreamed about.
I wanted to, I guess, and again, this kind of goes back to the experience I kept having in reading your book, but I think it was reflected in what you said about how, how would I feel or how would someone else feel? Like you might hate yourself if you or regret it if you didn't. And that's the thing. I don't think that's the typical reaction. I think most people would be like, well, I'm sorry, I can't, it's too bad. They wouldn't even see themselves as, they wouldn't even consider, well, I could marry this person and potentially provide them with insurance and like help them live out the next couple of years in a way that's more meaningful to them. Like, I don't even think that would have ever crossed my mind in that situation. And that's what I found so interesting. It was like, I read through and I was just like, oh yeah. Wait, what did he what did he do? Like, that's just a whole different perspective. And, you had certain upbringing and things like that, but it really did strike me as a pretty unique lens through which to see life as seeing yourself as like, well, what could I do about this? Not just, oh, this is a thing that's happening to somebody, but like maybe I could change the situation, and having that be such a default mode for you and for such a significant decision.
It goes back in the book I talk about, it goes back to my grandmother who basically raised me. I grew up in an early divorced home. Mother had to work full time. We weren't making any money, had to move with my grandmother because we couldn't afford a home. And my grandmother was always there, when I came, and she took me under her wing. She once told me she had 4 kids, 2 daughters, 2 sons. She says I was her 5th child from her view. And she had taught me from her lessons in life. And that's why the book spends time with her on the first. She would say, she's a very religious woman, believe that we are here for a reason. We don't know what that reason is, but we're here for a reason. And she says, if you ever find yourself in a situation where somebody is in a desperate situation and you have the opportunity and the ability, most importantly, the only one who has the ability, you have to do something about it. That's her moral code of how you live as a human being. And in that case, there's another time when we get into the Mexico situation when I make a decision there. Or it's not the Mexico, it's the insurance with Tony. We can get to that later, but the situation is this, is that I really was the only one that could make a difference in her life, and I wasn't giving up a lot. I could use a couple years to find myself. You see what I'm saying? And so that's the thought process that went through, and I just felt that that's the I was brought into this world to live a certain way. My grandmother had a great influence on what that was, but I would start living my life under that moral code that I had been taught. And several times in my life I made the same decision at different levels of magnitude. Some of them it's not important to talk about, but it's just how I feel. I would like people to think about that. This is how we love each other as human beings, but I I guess what I'm trying to say, and I talk about this in my section on Notre Dame, about the the principle of making decisions about life in closest to the actual person who has the impact.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look at each other as individuals and not a group. You know what's gone on with it. It's gotten out of hand. But the thing is, when I look at a person as an individual, I no longer think I can think about them. I can now empathize with them. And empathy is one of the things that makes us human, better humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned I had almost forgotten about the Mexico story too, but to your point, I think what's startling, repeatedly shocking throughout your book, the stories are fascinating, but it really is the way that you lived out the philosophy and have lived, and I assume do live the philosophy of, well, if there's somebody who's in a situation in my life, I'm aware of it and I can do something about it, then it's like a moral responsibility to act. And while that's easy to say, it's an entirely another thing to take that sort of that leap to think about, well, what could I do? And actually do it. I mean, I don't know of anyone. I'm sure there are other people out there, probably somewhere, sometime, who have married somebody just to provide them with insurance so they could live out the expected lifespan in a more meaningful way. But if you, well, I just wanted to say, even if you didn't perceive that as being a significant sacrifice, like even if it was, well, I need a couple years to figure myself out, just the fact that you thought about it at all is what repeatedly kind of startled me as I went through the book. Like, would I have even considered that possibility? I don't think I would have. And what is the difference in the way that we're thinking that caused you to think of it that wouldn't cause me to think of it? And that really helped me to consider how I think. Like, it was the most value I pulled from the book was just the reflecting on how might I think differently that would cause me to take that sort of action to help people in that way.
I wanted to share the story because I wanted to share with people that experience. I'm not asking. I just think. Let me explain to you why that gesture on my part came back and just hit me in an extremely high, emotionally high level. Back in 2022, Carlene died. Now remember, she's only going to live 24 months. She lived all the way through to the the 21st century, and she had in her will. And this is I cried like a baby. I got a call one night from a girl I didn't know. She identified herself and as Carlene's friend and said she has passed away. And she says she left a will and she had instructions to call you and tell you that you basically gave her the gift of life she wouldn't have had if I hadn't taken her to Chicago, because Buffalo, New York did not have the medical capability to keep her alive.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I just want you to know that I had the life I had because of that. And I want him to know that. And I just basically sat back and said, wow. I mean, I'm getting emotional right now. But think about the impact on that. They get that phone call, 20 years later. And it's kind of I think that's a good feeling to have. And I just wanted to, this whole book was a letter to my kids. I never wrote it as a thing. I was telling them about me that they didn't know. My kids knew nothing about me, how I lived, how I made decisions prior to my meeting their mother. But what I turned into when I got advice from friends and professionals that it really needs to be a book where it's something the whole world could learn something from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason why I wrote it, and pushed it into a novel. But I really believe, those are for me to sit here and remember the fact that she said that in her will, makes I get on my knees and be grateful I made that decision. I could not have made a better decision in my entire life because of what had happened to her, because I did. And I think, I just wanted to share that with my story with people.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. It touched me. And I did want to, now since you reminded me of the Mexico story, I'd really love for you to share that too, because I think that's an instance where that mentality and that philosophy and approach to life that you had shows up in not just a you situation, but where you're actually going against. You have some people who are pushing you the other direction, and then you're actively standing against it, which is, I think, a situation a lot of people find themselves in, and they just go with the majority opinion. So I'd love if you could share that story.
The Mexico story was interesting. It really occurred between my first cross-country race with the love of my life, Nancy, and the second. After coming back to Chicago, Nancy and I were pretty much burned out with each other. We had just been in the car for almost 2 weeks and living in it, and it just, But then I got a call to come down to the CEO's office, president's office, and said, "You're getting an assignment to go to Mexico. Atlantic Richfield is drafting you, the corporate headquarters." And it was really about the fact that the entire Latin American community was going bankrupt and defaulting on their loans. That was the context to create the book. But the situation was, I was really one of the few members of that task force that were from a manufacturing background. They were all bankers from JP Morgan or Chase, or went to school at Harvard, Yale, or London School of Economics. And, I really didn't have the credibility with them. Arco thought I did, because Arco realized that the business we're looking at is like what Arco was running. They wanted me to come down and help make the decisions to make a good business decision. Mm-hmm. And it really came down to, it was an exhausting thing. We were losing people left and right to Montezuma's revenge. I mean, it was back to the point where the water was really bad in Mexico. I think it still is. And nobody really wanted to be there. Nancy was breaking up with me. And I'm sitting there in Mexico City, and this is before cell phones, so I couldn't talk to her. And it was really devastating. But in the course of it, I got to know a lot of the Mexican middle management, the controller and that, and I ended up getting to know them as people. And I could still remember going to Luis's home, which is extremely gracious, with a couple of my friends. And they had the entire community. They were having a great fest, and they were talking about how, and this is the point where I'm only thinking about myself. I mean, okay, I'm losing the love of my life, big deal. Well, it was a big deal. And he got up and made a quick speech saying that these people are here to help us. They're help us save our jobs. And that changed everything about, I slept about it. I heard it last night. Tonight, I dreamt about it. I swear, almost God, I had a voice talking to me. And those who've had drinks that are sometimes a little spiritual, you know what I'm talking about. We can't prove it is, but it was what I was experiencing. That, I remember a voice saying to me, "This is why you're here." Whether that was my subconscious brain manufacturing or a spiritual connection, I don't know. I may choose the spiritual because I think I'd like to believe that when I die, it's after death. But the thing was, I got up the next day and I decided to make a difference. I grabbed everybody. I grabbed the managing director, and I asked for a meeting, and I talked about what I had found in the manufacturing environment that I had been out there doing. The long and short of it is that I got up. I had no intentions of doing this the next day, but something happened to me where I felt compelled. I was on a mission to do it, and it was almost like my talk was almost like somebody writing it for me. I mean, I remember, being challenged as to, I said, you can't shut things down. They were going to shut it down. They were going to basically liquidate the inventory, pay the banks back. And I tried to explain, you're destroying the business next year, the year after. That's a long story. And I said, and I remember the thing that got their attention. They said, well, why is that? I says, you have working capital lag time. If you remember COVID, that was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
People, reason why I didn't get things in the stores, wouldn't get toilet paper, the supply chain had broken down, and it got some attention. They may, these are good people. They just weren't experienced. They were financial people, not manufacturing. And I went through how the mines were going to get shut down, and it takes 9 months to get them up. You're not going to, what's going to happen when the next loan comes due? I went through that manufacturing model with them. And when you say,
real quick, when you say loans come due, who owed the loans again? What was the situation?
Basically, the major financial institutions in the United States and Europe owned them.
Yeah.
And they could force bankruptcy because they're not getting paid back. And if they force bankruptcy, they were talking a liquidation bankruptcy, which is different than reorganization, meaning they were going to sell everything.
And my understanding was this was basically a whole industry in Mexico. It wasn't just like a single company.
Industrias Nicobari was the entity that we were focusing on.
Yeah.
But it was one of the largest industrial firms in Mexico. But what it did, and this is what people understand, if you were to take bankrupt General Motors or and they no longer are in business, it isn't just General Motors employees that hurt; it's all the suppliers that get hurt. General Motors actually has more suppliers than they have employees. So the point being, it's much more devastating. The Industrias Nicobari had the same thing. And so it was a situation where a lot of people are going to lose their jobs and never get them back. And I just really, in that epiphany the night before, went back into the mode about what do I do, what's going on, and how can I make a difference? I had been off that for a while because of Nancy. I'd been, was sucking my thumb, and but it made a difference. And at the end of the day, it ended up being the most brilliant move we made, to not divest, but to invest. We started putting money into the company to get it ready, and it turned out to be a massive success. And, I ended up being, I didn't know this, but I ended up being invited into the CEO's office with all his direct reports and people from LA. And they came, I walked in, they were clapping. I said, what's this? And he told me, the president of the company basically said to us that the only reason we're here is because of Ed Rahill, because he made that point that made the difference. And the CEO said, we could have lost up to 200,000 jobs if that hadn't happened. And my boss at the time, Larry Shannock, really the model for being a boss. As I walked out, he was walking with me. He says that's not the case. He says there is no welfare, there's no unemployment, there's nothing. Every one of those employees has a family to support, not just their wife and kids, but also their grandparents. That's Mexico. He says you're looking at upwards of 1 million or more people who you impacted with that effort. And if I hadn't made that 24-hour effort, none of that would have happened. So in a sense, I look back and it's kind of a little bit different than Carlene, but I'm starting to understand that if you have the right attitude And you can make a difference. And I think we don't realize, again, how we make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
I never looked at that meeting, that 11, 12 o'clock meeting with the team that went on for about 20 minutes. I never looked at it as, I kind of forgot about it,
mm-hmm.
And when they started changing their tune, I was grateful. Matter of fact, they took it over.
Yeah.
After they had private meetings without me, and they came back and said, "This is a great idea." And that was their idea. But the point was, enough people remembered that it was something I germinated, and they grew. And so it really was a team effort. But the reality, if I hadn't, it's kind of like A Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. If I hadn't been there, would that have happened?
Yeah, it did. I mean, based on what you wrote, it seemed like it wouldn't have. It seemed like they had kind of figured out what they were going to do, and they were ready to move on. And
they were just trying to do their job, which was
of course,
pay back the banks. And it was an impact that I'm proud of. I'm also proud of the what I did with Tony and the insurance thing with him. But those are the things I wanted to share. I'm not trying to talk about myself and what a great person I'm in. I would like people to think about, well, you might be in that situation someday, and just reflect.
Yeah.
Just reflect what this can mean. How much is it really going to cost you to make that step?
Right.
And what's the potential outcome if you do? It's each of those situations, Carlene, and I could have easily just walked away.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
with the patent lawsuit, Carl Brennan. It's just like, I'm really almost scared when I look at this, how close I came not to making that decision.
Right.
That's the amazing thing to me. I mean, it's almost, wow.
That's what I was thinking. Like that's the mental calculus that you just mentioned there is what I rarely do. I think most people rarely do, because usually I think going into a meeting like that, you got a lot of people in agreement about, all right, we're gonna do this. It makes sense. It's in alignment with the mission, what we came here to do, whatever. We've done the models. 20-minute meeting should be pretty straightforward. And in your situation, I think the typical thinking would have been, I don't know, I don't feel great about this. If I speak up about it, I might look kind of dumb. I might get ignored. Maybe it won't be a big deal, but it'll be uncomfortable. I might get some dirty looks, whatever. And then I'll just feel dumb. It'll be kind of a bad day. Do I really want that to happen? Nah. But but the other calculus would be, well, having a maybe slightly uncomfortable experience, kind of a bad day, getting some dirty looks, or what could happen is potentially I have a transformative effect on an industry and really help a million people have a much better life. Okay, well then all of a sudden, like, the calculus totally changes. It's not the same situation anymore, but that's a leap, that's a different way of thinking.
The thing I just want to share with you, Collin, is when I made the decision to do that, I wasn't thinking about a million people. I was thinking this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I had faith and confidence that I knew that from my experience in the manufacturing sector, you're gonna damage this industry big time.
Yeah.
And you were right about my status. I was a senior financial analyst at Arco, and these guys were executive directors at multinational investment banks. Where do I, get credibility? What I had to do was, I had worries about that because we all have our little insecurities at times, even though we can talk to ourselves like, yeah, we're all there. Well, yeah. And, but I just, that night before, convinced me and got a mission in my soul that I needed to do this. I needed to get it out there. I needed to tell them what I really think, what I see that they don't see. And it made it ignited. I was like the blasting cap on the dynamite. Because I went off, the rest of them went off. And that's the thing that I'm most proud of, because I can sit back and look at the fact that I did something small, I did the right thing, and it had a great impact, and it involved other people. That's the important thing. When we say we can impact other people, you can impact them to do the right thing. Yeah. They took charge and carried the water for this thing. And I was grateful to sit back and watch them, make presentations about this idea, knowing it was mine. I mean, it was because the CEO and the vice president of finance, called my boss and said, "Hey, we were there. Ed made that difference, that I got the recognition." But in the end of the day, that wasn't why I was doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a way that it's influenced me after reading the book, caused me to think more. Since reading it, I have spent more time thinking about, well, it's regular for me to interact with like 40 people in a day, like a real conversation interaction, something like that. And it's very easy for me to look at my schedule and be like, okay, I've got basically like 8 meetings today. So I've got 8 people I'm talking to. Really, it's like 40 people over the course of the day, but here's the ones that are important, and then the rest are just kind of whatever. But what reading your book has caused me to think more about is like, every single interaction I have in a day has the potential to just kind of like start an avalanche, right? Just like that little tap. Like, and if I can maybe I'll just, smile at somebody that I would have normally just like looked the other way when we're walking down the street. And I have no idea what the effect that's going to have, but you never know. And it only takes a super small decision, choice, interaction to make a difference.
I don't know if you heard this expression before. It's called the butterfly effect.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And, as I look back on life, one of the frustrations I have is I don't always look at the big picture. I'm a typical human being with my life, and I'm looking at it from the world from my perspective. I'm just sharing with people that we are maybe making an impact. We need to start. I would like us to start thinking about that in our human interactions. It really. I think we are not perfect, but I do feel we're going to be a lot happier with our lives if we do that. We all have our moments where we realize at the end of the day, I did the right thing and feel good about it.
Yeah. And for every one of what I love about your story is you actually got to see a couple cases in which there was kind of a clear cause and effect of small decision and a huge impact at the end. But there's probably also millions of interactions you've had that have also done that you just don't know about. That's what it got me thinking about.
Collin, I'll challenge you. Take a look at your life and just start scanning back your history. And you probably remember some comments somebody made to you 10 years ago. Somebody made it. And it's caused you to think that person had an impact. And it may not be dramatic. It may be just why you like the color blue. But the but the point is that I think the difference between us and other forms of life, we are sentient in a way that we have the ability to be self-reflective. We can have the ability to look at ourselves in relation to the world. I have a fantastic dog. I mean, he frigging hugs me every day and everything, but he's operating at a level, with strictly how he feels about me, not about the impact he's making on that rabbit out in the whatever he chases. And that's fine. But think about the fact that we're at the dawn of a higher form of life.
Yeah,
we are. Think about the human race and how it's over couple 100,000 years. It's evolved, and actually millions of years. And we are reached the dawn of self-awareness. I think the thing that makes us different than any other form of life on the planet, I don't know about the universe, is our ability to be self-aware. to look at ourselves and how we're impacting everything else.
Yeah.
That is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm trying to say, is that we can use that for good if we have a good moral code.
Yeah. And it's funny that you bring up the challenge of reflection. I actually, just earlier today on a call, I was sharing how I can trace a lot of really significant changes in my life to a specific thing that one person said. And it was Jonathan, the founder of this podcast, who ran the first 300 episodes.
There you go.
I my first conversation with him, which was probably, I don't know, it's probably like 8 years ago or something at this point. But one thing he said to me in that conversation was, any influencer can connect you to 100 other influencers. And the word influencer didn't mean what it meant. It means something now. Back then it was just a connected person who's influential, whatever. But he said that, and I followed it up with a question of like, well, okay, who would you be willing to connect me to? And that question, that statement he made, and the question I asked after that changed the course of my life. And very clear, I can trace it back, like all these different relationships. And it completely changed my life. And he could have not said that. I could have not asked the question and just would have ended the call and moved on with my day. And that's a completely different life path that I end up taking. So yeah, I've seen it. And I would like to reflect on that more too.
Well, I'm grateful that, I wrote the book to tell, this goes to the impact. At the end of the book, I talk about, in context of what my life and what I've learned from it. And I make a comment that life is like a relay race in track and field. And each runner takes the baton and does the best they can in that race around that they have to run to do the best, become the best they can. But what I've learned, or I believe I'm learning, because I think we continue to learn, is that there comes a time when I need to start looking at the fact that I'm taking on a 4-corner turn of a quarter mile, I'm coming off the 4th turn and I'm heading toward the finish line. And it's going to be time for me to hand my baton off to the next runner. And, and we need to remember that who we are very much is impacted by the runners before us who transfer their experience, good and bad, and wisdom to us, helping us become a better runner. And our job is to do that to the next baton holder, the next runner, the next generation to become better. We just think about, and this is why I believe life is like this. Think about how far our species has come in 10,000 years. Think about it. I mean, and it only happened, none of us right now, when we start out in life, we're living off the past. Mm-hmm. It's the knowledge and wisdom of the past that we're living off. And we learn how to think, we learn how to do it. And then we take the past and we do new things and add to it. And the microphone you're talking on wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been somebody in the past. And so I think, what I'm trying to say, I think for me, it makes I kind of reach a peace in life that I understand that my life is finite, but that I have a reason for being here. Mm-hmm. And I think knowing you have a reason for having been here brings a peace to you that we all need. And that I also realize that if we stay true to our conscience, no matter how difficult, at the end of the day, my experience has been, you're going to be grateful you did. You're going to be very happy that you stuck with it. That's the message.
Well, I really appreciate you running your race with perseverance and passing on your baton to me and all the other listeners and the many people that you've touched with your life so far.
Well, yeah, but you're doing it right now. You're making a difference right now. And I think that's important for you to understand. The very fact you're doing this is making a difference in a way you don't know. but let's put this, not this podcast, but of the podcasts you're doing, you're impacting somebody somewhere in what you've done. And they're going to remember it. And they'll be sitting in their car worrying about something at a traffic light. And then something you had said, and one of the things will pop in their brain, say, well, maybe I should take that approach.
Yeah. And if you are listening to this, by the way, we are wrapping up here, and you've been impacted in some way by this episode, what Ed's shared, or by something else you've heard on the show, or you read his book, again, 1 Mile at a Time. Check it out. I really enjoyed it. I think you will too. If that impacts you, you can email me, let me know. It's Collin, Collin, SuperHumanAcademy.com. And Ed, where can they reach you? Do you want people to reach out to you?
Yeah. My webpage is edwardrahill.com. That shows my webpage. I have a email address that is ed@edwardrahill.com. And then I have another address which is more direct to me, but I think the people beyond this would be somebody I'd like to hear from. And it's emrahill@outlook.com. And then finally, on Facebook and Instagram, it's author Edward Rahill. On both of those. I'm also getting on TikTok and everything, but I got to wait for that marketing manager to come in and run my life, because I'll tell you right now, as a former CEO, the key to success is who you hire, not you. I'm serious. It really is. And so I'm looking forward to that person. But thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
God bless and have a great week.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
The SuperHuman Academy Podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing SuperHuman Academy community at SuperHumanAcademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.